Detroit, Michigan. The night air carried a damp chill, the kind that seeps into empty lots and forgotten alleys. A weak cry broke through the silence, faint and raspy, pulling the attention of a woman taking out her trash. She froze, listening as the sound came again, thin, trembling, the sound of something clinging to life. In the dim light of a flickering street lamp, a shape staggered forward. A cat, no larger than a child's backpack, emerged from the shadows, its body trembling, its fur torn and matted. He collapsed onto the cracked asphalt, his ribs pushing sharply against his paper-thin skin. Every movement came with an agonized pause, a scratch so frantic it tore more of his fragile coat away. His tail, once proud and balanced, dragged lifelessly behind him. The woman gasped, hands covering her mouth as she took in the sight. His entire body seemed alive with movement, not from his own will, but from the crawling infestation consuming him. Neighbors soon gathered, their whispers laced with horror, their eyes unable to look away. The cat tried to rise again, but his legs folded like broken sticks beneath him. His voice cracked into a cry so soft, so pitiful, it made even the toughest man there lower his eyes. The closer they came, the more the truth revealed itself. His body wasn't just frail, it was overtaken. Tiny, merciless parasites had spread across his skin, gnawing at every inch of his frame. The sight was grotesque, unbearable, like watching a life unravel one scratch at a time. One neighbor, a tall man with graying hair and a steady presence, stepped forward. His name was John Harris, and though his heart raced, his steps carried resolve. He knelt down slowly, his voice a whisper. "It's okay, buddy. We'll get you help." But the cat, terrified and broken, only curled tighter into himself, as though trying to disappear. Every breath he took came shallow, trembling, as if even air was too heavy a burden.
John reached into his jacket and pulled out a faded towel, wrapping it carefully around the frail creature. Gasps rippled through the group as they caught a closer glimpse of the cat's skin beneath the sparse fur. The patches were raw, inflamed, crawling with the torment that wouldn't let him rest. John tightened his hold, not in fear, but to shield the animal from the staring eyes, from the biting wind, from further suffering. The woman who first heard the cries wiped her eyes, whispering, "How long has he been like this?" No one could answer. The cat's condition spoke of weeks, maybe months of silent torment. His body was a map of suffering, every sore and wound a marker of neglect, of invisibility. Yet even in this state, his eyes opened slightly, revealing something unexpected. Beneath the pain there flickered a fragile spark. He was still fighting. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, though not for him. The night carried on around this small tragedy indifferent. But for those standing in that alley, the world had narrowed to one fragile life in John's arms. The man cradled the cat against his chest, whispering promises he wasn't sure he could keep. The cat's tiny claws twitched against the fabric, not out of aggression, but as if trying to hold on, even with nothing left to give. The group parted as John carried him toward his truck. Whispers followed, some fearful, some hopeful. The engine roared to life, headlights cutting through the darkness. As the cat's frail body shifted beneath the towel, John's jaw clenched. He knew what awaited at the clinic would be painful to witness, but necessary. And when the veterinarians finally uncovered the truth beneath that fragile skin, they would discover something even more terrifying. The clinic lights were harsh, sterile, almost too bright for the fragile body laid upon the table. John stood nearby, his hands still trembling from the drive.
The veterinarians worked quickly, their voices calm but urgent, their eyes darkened by what they saw. One lifted the towel and froze. The team exchanged looks that spoke louder than words. This wasn't just a sick stray. This was a body under siege, held hostage by countless invaders. With gloved hands, the vet leaned in, parting the sparse fur. What they saw beneath made even the seasoned nurse exhale sharply. The parasites were everywhere, burrowed, clinging, feeding. The cat barely flinched as the first set of tweezers pulled one away. He had no strength left to resist, no energy for fear. His chest rose and fell in shallow rhythm, as though every breath might be the last. Yet his eyes remained open, glistening, as if silently begging them not to stop. The team moved methodically, their tools clinking softly against metal trays. The scent of antiseptic filled the air, sharp and sterile, battling against the musty odor of decay clinging to his skin. Warm water cascaded from a hose, carrying away dirt, blood, and remnants of suffering. The cat trembled slightly at the touch, but then grew still, surrendering completely to their hands. Each pass of the sponge, each careful pluck of tweezers was a battle against time. John stepped closer, unable to stay on the sidelines. He reached out, letting his fingers brush gently against the cat's damp fur. "You're safe now," he whispered, though his throat tightened with doubt. The cat's eyes flickered toward him, not wide with panic as before, but softer, faintly aware. That spark from the alley hadn't been extinguished. It burned weakly, but it burned. Hours stretched into something timeless, the team rotating, refusing to let exhaustion slow them down. The cat's frail body lay swaddled in warmth now, heated blankets replacing the cold towel. Fluids flowed into his veins through a thin tube, carrying strength back into his fragile frame.
His paws twitched, not in pain this time, but as though his body was remembering what it felt like to move without agony. For the first time, his breathing grew steadier. The lead vet exhaled, glancing at John with weary eyes. "He's fighting," she said simply. John nodded, though his hands clenched the fabric of his jeans. Fighting. Such a small word for such a monumental battle. Every parasite removed, every wound cleaned, was a piece of the war won. And still, uncertainty loomed. Could he survive the days ahead? Could his body recover from such relentless assault? The cat stirred, letting out a faint, hoarse meow. The sound was fragile, broken, but it cut through the sterile silence like a song. Everyone in the room paused, turning toward him. It wasn't just noise. It was a request, a plea, maybe even a thank you. His eyes met John's again, and something passed between them, unspoken but powerful. He wasn't letting go. In that fragile moment, the room felt different. The air seemed lighter, the fatigue less crushing. Against all odds, the cat had chosen to stay, to trust the hands around him. And then, as John leaned closer, something happened that no one expected. A small, trembling sound, deep in the cat's chest. It was a purr. Morning sunlight poured through the clinic windows, casting soft warmth over the recovery room. The cat lay curled in a clean bed lined with fleece, his body still thin but no longer racked with constant twitching. His fur, though patchy, was free of the crawling torment that once consumed him. A gentle hum filled the air, the steady rhythm of a tiny, fragile life that had refused to fade. John stood at the doorway, eyes misting as he watched. Every day brought a new milestone. On the second morning, the cat lifted his head on his own, blinking slowly at the light. On the third, he sniffed cautiously at a bowl of food, and though his first bites were clumsy, he swallowed with determination.
By the fourth, his paws carried him, shaky but proud, toward John's waiting hand.
Each step was a victory, each breath a triumph. The volunteers who came to see him were moved to tears. They whispered his name, Shadow, chosen for the way he first emerged from the alley darkness. He seemed to listen, his ears twitching, his body leaning toward the voices that spoke gently, tenderly, as if words themselves could heal. The room, once heavy with fear, now glowed with hope. John spent hours sitting by his side, his large hands resting on the fleece near Shadow's paws. Sometimes he spoke, sometimes he didn't. Presence was enough. The bond grew silently, formed not from games or play, but from survival, from shared resilience. Shadow began to press his small body against John's fingers, a fragile gesture of trust that felt larger than words. Weeks passed, and Shadow's eyes began to shine brighter, no longer dulled by pain. His coat grew back in tufts, soft and clean, like patches of new earth after a storm. He discovered toys, batting clumsily at a dangling string, then pausing to glance at John, as if asking permission to enjoy this new life. His purr grew stronger too, a steady rumble that filled the clinic halls, touching everyone who heard it. The day came when Shadow leapt, small, unsteady, but free. He jumped onto John's lap, curling himself tightly against the man's chest. The volunteers who witnessed it fell silent, overcome by the sight. This wasn't just recovery, it was rebirth. A creature once consumed, broken, now pressed his heart against the very hands that saved him. John lowered his face, resting his cheek gently against Shadow's head. His eyes closed, not to hide his tears, but to savor the warmth of this moment. The alley, the parasites, the near-death cries, all seemed distant now, replaced by the sound of breath, the pulse of life, the trust of one soul in another. Sometimes, the greatest battles are fought in silence, against enemies unseen.
And sometimes, the smallest victories, one breath, one purr, one leap, become the most unforgettable. Shadow had faced the invisible war and survived. And in the shelter of compassion, he found not just survival, but the courage to live again.